Hello, everyone. This is Wei Sung Lin. I'm a medical doctor practicing in the state of Washington. Today, I want to share with you my immigrant experience, in particular, to let you know what I experienced when I grew up in China, where I lived for 24 years, and to warn you where our nation, the United States, is heading. And the picture is not pretty. So I'm going to talk about life as it was that I experienced in China, how I came to the United States and why, and what I saw in the United States in the years that I developed my understanding about this nation and why I love it, and then the warning signs that I'm seeing now. So I grew up in China during the years of the so-called Cultural Revolution, which started in 1966 by Mao Zedong, who was the dictator that ruled China. In fact, the reason why he started the Cultural Revolution was that his power was deteriorating, or his control of the country was um, going down a little bit because in the late 1950s, he started this great leap forward that pushed China into 3 years of famine, which killed millions, tens of millions of people from starvation and the collapse of the whole economy. So, in order to get out of the mess, he stepped aside from the highest power and led Liu to lead the nation in recovery for a few years. So as Liu grew in popularity, Mao became very jealous and also very insecure about his own position. And in order to take back the power and total control of everything in China, he started this so-called Cultural Revolution, which basically was inciting some young people to start destroying the culture that the Chinese people had for many years, with the name of attacking the capitalistic remnants or the revisionist ideology that was represented by Liu. But in that process, the nation that was just starting to have some recovery was brought back into another 10 years of great devastation. And so most of the time that I grew up as a elementary student and middle school student was during those 10 years. And what I saw and experienced was poverty, not only material poverty, which was true, but also poverty of idea and lack of hope. And also people were totally controlled in what they could think and what they could say. Now, I grew up in Guangzhou, which is a city that is in the southeast part of China. It is a relatively rich area if it weren't for the government policies. It has good weather to grow crops and also good weather to grow fruits and vegetables. But during the time that I was growing up, we lived on very strict rations. Each family would have only enough to rice to maybe feed all the mouths, and very little meat. And we have to stand on long lines to get vegetable every day, because if you get there late, they're all going to be gone. There's no shelves full of selections in the supermarkets, any of those kind of things during that time. The poverty of idea was not because the Chinese people being unintelligent, but rather because there was this suppression and mind control that the Communist Party exert on the people, that people could not express idea. We were not allowed to read books from the Western culture. We were not allowed to watch movies from Western culture, and we were allowed to only watch those approved movies by the Communist Party, and or the and therefore, everything that we went by was that little red book. And if Mao had made a new um, edit, a new order, everybody have to celebrate that fact, and everybody have to show loyalty. All the newspaper, all the media were repeating the same line that the central government wanted people to parrot. So there is no knowledge of what things are happening in the world to most of the people in China, even though we have a sense that people elsewhere couldn't really be that bad off. But the central government's lie is that China is probably the best country in the world, and everybody else is living hell right now and waiting for us to liberate them. In the later part of the Cultural Revolution, when people finish high school, they wouldn't have to be sent to countryside to receive re-education, so that they know how to live in the countryside, or how and in fact, in part, was to solve the problem that there is severe unemployment, or or lack of growth in the industry because of the bad government policy. So, so while I was growing up, there's very little hope for me, someone who is good at nothing else but study. My brother had tried to escape China to cross over to Hong Kong several times, and each time he was caught and had to be sent to prison for a short time. But a lot of young people could only hope to get out of China. The ideology of communism sounded nice when the Communist Party took over, that everybody could have what they need and what they wanted. Um, Everything is going to be distributed equitably, but that's just a pipe dream. In fact, it is only going to enrich the few who are in power. And in order to maintain their power, Mao created one cultural or political movement or campaign, one after another, to destroy his political enemies, or even anyone who remotely threatens him, even those who had fought to win the civil war alongside of him. So pretty much all his political allies during the war eventually have been persecuted to death, except for a few. So people live in constant fear that they might be overheard saying anything contrary to the political superior, and therefore could be subject to ridicule, could be subject to persecution, and even sometimes being murdered. So in 1976, Mao died, and then Deng, who was the leader who saw the nation that was really going downhill quickly, decided to open up the economy and open up the education system a little bit, so that the university started taking students by academic merit. So it was at about that time that I'm nearing the end of my schooling, secondary school. So I was able to get into medical school in China and graduated in 1983. Now, but even so, there was still a lack of opportunity unless you really follow the party line. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do. And eventually that led me to explore the possibility of coming to the United States as a graduate student, because I've heard good things about the US, contrary to what the official media says. I had other friends and schoolmates who had come to the U.S. either as students or some as immigrants, and they say in a long words that this is a land of opportunity. So that's what caused us to want to come. And when I came to the US, I was as a graduate student to the University of Buffalo. It was a big change. I came from a very southern part of the country, a very warm, humid climate, into very cold Buffalo. In the first winter, it was tough, but it was there that I learned how to be a person of independence. First, there's no government assigned housing, and you have to learn how to get your apartment, share the room with, share the house with others, and budget how small amount of a scholarship that I got in order to not only live on, but also save enough to get my first car. But once I had the first car and learned to drive, I experienced the freedom that you have in terms of being able to go places, and had the appreciation of why the freedom in a market driven by market economy can bring prosperity to more people. At this point, I think I still thought that primarily I was in the U.S. in order to, get a better life and get more out of it, a better economic future. A couple years after I came, when the students on Tiananmen Square started the pro-democracy movement in China, we started paying more attention to so-called political side of things. We started a group locally in Buffalo to support the Chinese pro-democracy movement. And then a year after the Tiananmen massacre, we wanted to hold a rally to commemorate that. When it was denied by the local authority, the mayor of Buffalo, we took him to court with the help of some rather liberal lawyers. But it was that time that I learned that the rights were guaranteed by the Constitution. And it's most important to know that just having a so-called market-driven economy or free market economy is not enough if there's no Constitution guaranteed individual rights. Government is going to interfere with that eventually. But that is only a limited understanding of the political process. And during that time, most of my friends that talk about politics were more on the liberal side, because those are the people that at that time that I got to know. And I've heard their concern for China, and I thought they were more sincere, wanting China to become a force of democracy. And so that's why I was working with them at that time. In 1992, I became a Christian, and my understanding began to deepen, looking into the religious roots in the founding of the nation. So I understand that the freedom, the reason why this idea about liberty that was not from the government, but rather liberty that was given by God, or the rights that were endowed by the Creator, or the equality, were all originated from the Judeo-Christian moral. And without that moral foundation, the U.S. wouldn't have been able to have the Constitution as it is, and wouldn't have the moral fortitude to confront its own sins and right its own wrongs. And it is with that kind of foundation, the moral foundation and the Constitution, these free-spirited people was able to create a society, both thriving in the economy and also welcoming to immigrants like myself who want to work hard to contribute to the wealth of the society while pursuing their own dreams. And these understanding, I think, is more important in my later development into seeing things, uh, seeing the importance of a conservative viewpoint. That is, that we need to keep a lot of the tradition values that got U.S. from a humble beginning into being a great nation. And it is those values that cause us as immigrants to have been able to thrive here and contribute to the society, to the well-being of everyone around us as well. But as good as things were, we also began to see things that are deteriorating over the last 10 years or maybe even a little more, but is much, much more so during the last 2 years. Because in the 30 years since I became a Christian, and then 5 years later, I became a citizen, I've been able to vote every time, but I haven't been truly active in the civic or political process until 2019, 2020, when we really see that there is a force to destroy America, to bring it into more like a system that's similar to the nation that I freed, not the nation that I came to. We see that crazy ideas, totally destructive to social societal norms, began to take hold and actually even accepted by a lot of the young people. Now, at first, we didn't understand, why this educational system tend to produce that kind of minds, because we've always thought that the U.S. universities were so great, Harvard, Stanford, Cornell, Yale, Princeton, historically have produced so many great minds, scientists, lawyers, statesmen, but it looks like more and more of the youth coming out had a bent on accepting the values that are most harmful to the society, promoting a dependency mentality to depend on the government rather than depending on their own labor. Now, in a free society, we do understand that we cannot ban ideas, we debate them. And therefore, citizens will choose based on merit which way the country should go. However, as more and more of the media get taken over by this lefty ideology, they promote that kind of ideology with their megaphone, and they're very good at creating narratives. And I think that part could have been learned from the Chinese Communist Party, or it could have simply be that every communist thought come from the same origin or the same master, and therefore they all are good at creating the very attractive narrative to help the poor and wanted those who wanted the benefit of free things would be lured into supporting such ideology. And also it can fool the people who do not have enough information to make their decision, or they are just either blissfully ignorant or willfully ignorant. They get taken on by those noble sounding objectives to achieve some sort of equity, and therefore they would participate and become active force for that change. But also the most damaging part is that they see their cause as being so noble that they feel any debate is not necessary. They should silence any opposing views, such as that of conservatives, and just by labeling them as any kind of phobics or fascist or racist. Now, I know that none of us wanted to be labeled those terms because we're not. But on the other hand, we should be able to debate whether a certain policy encouraging homelessness or drug use or sex change, whether those are either right for the person or right for the society. But yet, when they can label us as being fascist, they can just shut us out of the debate. These tactics were very similar to how China was under Mao. In 1957, just prior to the so-called Great Leap Forward that plunged the nation into deep devastation, there were a lot of debates, but very soon Mao said that these people who had ideas contrary to his were all right-wing extremists. The right-wing factions were anti-revolutionaries, and therefore they needed to be silenced, punished, persecuted. And subsequently, all of those thinkers and all of those who were willing to voice their opinions were taken to labor camp, and therefore they no longer will be able to criticize Mao's policies. And a very similar thing happening here. If these objections to the so-called progressive, but in fact destructive ideas could not be voiced, then they will take hold. They will take over our next generation. They will take over the government policies and plunge U.S. into deep, deep trouble. And there are no shortage of the terms that they can come up with in order to demonize anyone holding a conservative worldview. They can call us being Hitler. They can call us being Nazis, and therefore had rights not only to cancel us in terms of our voice, could cancel our account or even take us into prison. And that's what's happening. That's what's frightening me, because the U.S. is going to become a nation very similar to what China have been, and is no longer recognizable if it continue on this path for another year or two. And that's becoming especially apparent during the BLM rioting, and also subsequently with the pandemic handling, that some of the states, and then in 2021, the federal government take on the level of dictatorship that it has never had. The co-opting of the medical system with the government to enforce such invasion in our body by amplifying their lies of the pandemic, of the failure of the early treatment, and also of the vaccination. These are the things that really grieved me a lot, because I thought that even though they've taken over the news media, they've taken over the academia, but at least individual practicing physician still would have been able to practice medicine according to their conscience. But no, I've seen that since they have co-opting the higher echelon of academia, and also the regulatory agency, many people felt so threatened that they just fall in line, gave patients not the best medical advice, but the advice that would have been given by Dr. Fauci at CDC exact line, disregarding things that they actually see with their own eyes, and in a patient sitting in front of them that are suffering from the jabs. So I decided that I have to stand up and speak out against that, because this is one part of the deprivation of our liberty, very similar to during Mao's one-child policy, when he has such control over people's body that if you have a second pregnancy, you would be taken to have abortion right away. Or if you don't you don't agree to getting sterilization after having the first child, you may lose your job, you may lose your city resident registry, so you won't be able to send your kids to school in the city. All those tactics that the Communist Party used to use and now have been adopted hook, line, and sinker into the progressive camp. And it also wakes me up to the reality that just having capitalism alone is not enough to guarantee that the US will remain the nation that it was founded to be, because people who have gained a lot of money, they can sell out their soul to the highest bidder. I see how big tech being sold out to the woke ideologies, which normally speaking would not be good for business, but when they also have a big market in China waiting for them, and having the Chinese Communist Party handing out to them such rich contracts and such as incentive, I see that they sold out. I see that they're selling out US in order to gain their own wealth and influence. It's very important for us to not only mind our own business and create our own wealth, but also take very seriously our civic duty as citizens to protect the republic. So that's why, I decided that I have to stand up as an immigrant. I know what it has been in the nations that have gone into a system promoted by the communists, and therefore we don't want the US to go there. We don't want the US to leave what the founding leave the path that the founding fathers and all those who died giving their lives to protect and to build, to go into the path that our enemy actually wanted us to go, and that's self-destruction. We want America to continue to be where that people are free to own property, and they are free to use their God-given talents and aspiration to build their own wealth and contribute to the wealth of the society by doing productive work and enjoy the fruit of their labor. But more importantly, it needs to be protected in their liberty by the Constitution, and our morality need to continue to be based on the Judeo-Christian values, so that we have the guide rail of Constitution and our faith to continue to protect us in our path forward. And so here I'm making this video as a immigrants who love America, as a warning to my fellow Americans that do not just sit idly by as those who wish American ill are doing everything they can to try to destroy us. We must stand up to protect this country, take this country back, and keep it the great America that it is. And God bless you. God bless America.